How you doing? This is Rule of Law News. I'm going to talk about the blue wall of silence in law enforcement departments across the country. Generally, the blue wall of silence is needed in law enforcement departments across the country. Those law enforcement departments that do not follow an oath of office. Now, the oath of office is you swear to follow the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, the various laws. If any local law is inconsistent with the U.S. Constitution, then you will not enforce that law. If you do enforce that law, you're an oath breaker. You violated your oath. Now, it's different if you did it by accident, not knowingly. But if you knowingly do it, then you're a violator of the oath because you swear to uphold the Constitution and various laws to the best of your ability, to the best of your knowledge. Now, law enforcement departments across the country, those that are following the blue wall of silence. The blue wall of silence is established when official, lawful policy, which is the policy that the public knows about in the department, that policy is generally lawful. There may be some exceptions where they decide to implement some policy, and as it's applied, it's unlawfully applied. Now, the policy itself on its face is lawful, but being the way it's interpreted and applied, it becomes unlawful. Or the policy could be unlawful on its face, direct violation of the Constitution. Now, when the police department, any police department that decides they want to do something that is unlawful, that is contrary to the Constitution, the various laws of the state or the county, the police department will implement unofficial, unlawful policy. Now, when they implement these policies, they don't want the public to know about it because if they do, then it constitutes, if it's accidentally, if it happens, if the public finds out about those policies, then it's going to reveal the intent of the mayor, the commissioner, and the various other top brass in the department. For example, the NYPD implements quotas. It's a violation of labor law, New York State Labor Law 215A. They're not allowed to have quantitative quotas. They could have qualitative, which is it's the quality. For example, quantitative is you can't say give me one arrest a month or 10 arrests a month because if the officer doesn't observe any criminality going on and he doesn't have probable cause, how could he lawfully make an arrest? So the danger is when you have quantitative quotas, what happens is the officer's put under tremendous pressure to perform, to keep up his activity, they call it, to exercise proactive law enforcement measures, which is not necessarily a problem, but it's a problem if he's put under a tremendous amount of pressure, coerced and threatened to a possible termination. The officer may do stuff that he wouldn't normally do because he needs to feed his family and he needs to have his job. So in the NYPD, they have quotas. The quotas are arrest quotas. They have summons quotas for parking, traffic citations, various other things. They got quality of life summonses. They got stop and frisk quotas. And the problem with that is that the officer has tremendous pressure put on them. So sometimes what they do is they go outside the scope of the law. For example, they may stop somebody on the street and there's no reasonable suspicion. They may perform a Terry stop and there's no reasonable suspicion to stop the individual. And, it's a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Unreasonable search and seizure or depending upon what the officer does. The other thing is that once these policies are implemented, the officer can't bring it out to the public. How's he going to do that? He has a job to do. If he brings out that there's quotas to the public, he may get in trouble, get fired. So what the officer does, he goes along. He has to go along. So what happens is now the blue wall of silence becomes established. The blue wall of silence is when official lawful policy is in conflict with unofficial, unlawful policy, but the public doesn't know it exists. Once the unofficial, unlawful policy supersedes official aspects of the policy, then there's where the need for the blue wall of silence comes into play. Now, once they establish a blue wall of silence, officers generally have to start becoming more distant from their civilian friends. And the reason why is if they start disclosing too much about their activities and one of their friends decides to notify the district attorney, there's a possibility of prosecution. So what the officers have to do is tend to become more distant from civilians, and they tend to associate more with other law enforcement officers and their family members. And the problem with this is that there's no reason to do that. The department should not request or demand police officers to do anything that is contrary to the law. The problem is the mayor of New York City, Mayor de Blasio, but it's not just him, there's other mayors and the other ones. The mayor is obsessed with CompStat. CompStat is a software to determine statistically the crime increases in certain areas and all, and they reallocate resources by redeploying officers to areas where the crime spike is in that particular geographical area. The problem with that is now they send a large number of officers, they redeploy them to that area where the spike in crime is, and what they do is they tell them, we want a certain number of arrests, we want a certain number of stop and frisk, we want a certain number of tickets. We want to see your proactive measures, law enforcement measures. Now, if the police officers don't meet the quotas because they don't see a sufficient amount of criminal acts where to get enough arrests or tickets, the officers will be reprimanded, and if they don't come in the line, possibly terminated. They'll be retaliated against and all the other problems. They'll be transferred. They'll get punitive postings and all the other stuff that goes along. So a lot of times the officers come into line because they need to feed their family and their kids, and they need to have a job. And the problem with this is that the mayor is obsessed with these crime statistics. The mayor is worried about what the public perceives. But the problem is, if the mayor was so concerned about the crime and doing it in the proper way, enforcing the law, what the mayor would do is get the police with the civilians to come together to lobby the legislators to start making stricter laws. Because when you arrest somebody and he gets out on the street because he's diverted from the criminal justice system, because the district attorney diverts him, or they become too lenient on these people, the same people that the officer arrests over and over and over are back out on the street. So in the name of enforcing laws and quotas, they overstep the bounds of the law and they violate the law. And there's no reason for it. The officers could act within the parameters of the law. The Constitution puts constraints on these police officers. They're state actors. They put constraints on them. It's not to make them ineffective. It's to make them follow the Constitution. Now, if an officer was granted the right to kick in everybody's door just in case he could find somebody that committed a crime, but what about the citizens' rights to be let alone pursuant to the Fourth Amendment, or unreasonable search and seizure and other factors pertaining to it? So the officers don't need to do that. The officers could act within the parameters of the law, the Constitution, and when they do finally get somebody, arrest them based on probable cause, then that person should, if it's a severe offense, the person should do many years in jail. The problem is our system is designed where the officers just become overly aggressive and start arresting one person after another, and now those criminals get back out on the street. Recidivism rate is too high. So what we need to do is we need to lobby the government, the legislators, and the police need to come together with the people, and they need to get stricter laws, and the police need to act within the confines of the law and not outside the confines, because once they do that, there's a need to have a blue wall silence because they don't want the public to know. And the department should not put that much pressure on police officers, traffic enforcement agents, and anybody else to do that. The mayor knows about it. The internal affairs deputy commissioner knows about it, and everybody from the top to the bottom, even the district attorney, knows about these quotas. This is Rule of Law. I will continue next time pertaining to other matters. Take care.